Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the city's capital committee. Today is Friday, March 22nd, 2024. Thank you to the committee for doing the quick turnaround time. I know we met last Tuesday, and obviously we've got a lot to discuss, and so I wanted to make sure that we can get it all done within the time frame we have. You should have received some materials, I believe yesterday, regarding the agenda, as well as the exhibits that we're going to be discussing in the capital recommendations for next year. I'm going to pull up the first one, which is, let me see if I can do this. Hopefully you can all see that, and I can make it larger if we need to. This is basically the summary comparison that we had a previous earlier version of this and discussed in the last meeting. But I wanted to update you on a couple of items. First of all, there were some additional funds from gas tax revenues from last year that I've added to this thing. To the estimate for next year. This actually, the base estimate is 6.2, but it had some funds in there from last year that we appropriated, that would need to be appropriated. And also, I wanted to point out, just for everyone's benefit, the capital fund is made of a number of sources, the largest of which has been the half-cent sales tax and some of those park sales taxes. And then we had that smaller portion, which was I'll get into fund numbers here. 1205, which was sort of a miscellaneous mishmash of other things, which would be like general fund contributions. It would be sale of assets, the municipal garage revenues, things like that. And so they weren't significant. But now, in recent years, we've also gotten a distribution from the economic development sales tax, as well as I just pointed out the gasoline tax revenues. These are becoming significant. And because of that, what I was doing here, I thought it would be a good idea to break out in the uses side what those funds are used for. So, because originally it really didn't, the original sources weren't really significant enough to break out separately for purposes. But now with, for instance, the gas tax was supposed to be used for roads and bridges, we definitely want to be able to tie the revenue up above to the projects down below. And same thing with the economic development sales tax. So I've broken that out separately, and hopefully that's cleaner for you. And what that does is added some exhibits. And so so the detail behind it, renumbered those. But that's the purpose of that. It was just basically to break out what the sources and uses in the citywide capital account. Obviously, all the others were already established by ordinance and track to those half-cent sales tax revenues. So in looking at, again, the FY25 preliminary capital budget revenue estimate, we've got $80.5 million, of which about 35.8 or just under $36 million is from last year's operating surplus. So you're still in the $44 million range or so with recurring revenues. And the allocations, as I mentioned below, follow that, the regular sources plus the one-time sources. Again, this is the second page is similar to the exhibit I circulated before, but I've broken out those citywide projects. And I'm going to talk about road and bridge projects in a little bit, but it just breaks it out separately. Same thing, economic development sales tax. For the economic development sales tax, most of it's going towards the NGA financing agreement, because those were tied to economic development. There was in the economic development sales tax fund a balance from previous years that had not been transferred over, so we transferred that over. So to try to tie the sources and uses together, I put Soulard Market as the beneficiary of any additional over and above from the NGA financing agreement. So tying that as an economic development sales tax purpose. So in this fiscal year, it would be a higher amount, but going forward, it's not going to be a large amount, but it would be anything over and above the what we're spending on that financing agreement. But that would consume the projected portion of the economic development sales tax capital. And the rest of these items were the same. They're from the half-cent sales tax. Moving to, there's two exhibits for citywide. The second one is this half-cent sales tax, which we discussed before. But the big one here is all the other sources. And as you can see, this is what has the $35.8 million, or $35.9 million available balance. You can see all the fund sources coming in, and there's the 1/2 prior year operating surplus, which is providing, which we need to be allocating. Let me see. Oh, yeah, let me point this out. In filling out the road and bridge projects for the fuel tax, in discussing that with Rich, we've identified certain of those street and traffic projects that were on the needs inventory. And that is what we're trying to, rather than put that in the 36, we're thinking that should fit in the road, whatever we have available for the fuel tax. So on Rich's list where you see the 36 million, you didn't see those larger street projects because they're included in the base. I'll call that the base capital budget, which utilizing the gasoline tax. And these are identified as follows: Cass Avenue streetscape with 3.8 million, the 4th and Washington multimodal improvements at 625,000, the traffic management enhancement phase 6, which is from Hodemont to Grand of 800,000, the ADA bus stop improvements, the Kings Highway improvements, Gravois to Nottingham, and then rounding out the difference is an item for miscellaneous bridge repairs. That's the 7,684, 7,684,000, which matches this gasoline tax revenue availability. So that's why we're thinking that going forward, we'll be able to identify those projects or critical street projects and budget some of them, although obviously the need is so great, you're not going to be able to accommodate them all. But that's why those aren't on Rich's $36 million list, because they're located here.
Paul?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. That's great, because some of the things that I was hoping to see on the $36 million list are on that list, like the ADA bus stop improvement.
Right.
So just me as a new person to this capital committee, we're not talking about allocating those projects. We're talking about the 35 million, the half-year surplus. That's what we're the half of the year surplus rather. So this money is allocated on this chart, but can you tell me the process of actually it becoming? Is that just through the regular budget session? Is that through?
Yeah, this would be what we're doing here is reviewing all those capital and trying to allocate based on the revenues, and then we make this recommendation.
Okay.
And then it's presented as part of the budget, which goes to E&A in April, and then which goes to the full board in May. So and it's an item just like any other item in the budget. Obviously, there's been a lot of vetting through this.
Sure.
Business Advisory Committee, this committee, E&A, and then the final board. But it would be just like any other. Yeah, go ahead, Ann.
This would be part of the package of recommendations that we're
making.
That's
right. That's right.
So this would go in hand with the $35-ish million.
Yes, actually,
just making sure that it's not like two separate things that get separated from each other or anything.
That's a good question, because we have these exhibits all the time like that, but you don't. Obviously, there's going to be some big exhibit that we're going to find necessary to include with this. So this one, and just I'll get technical with you. This. Oh, shoot, what happened? Okay. This first citywide account is Fund 1205. That's the regular, that's just the regular capital for all those miscellaneous sources of revenue, including the fuel tax. And 1208 is specifically the half cent. So that's a different source. It's got some uses that work in tandem with 12 the other sources, but that's separate. So what we'll probably do is once we arrive at some recommendations for the 36 million or $35.9 million, we'll have this exhibit will probably be a 2-pagers, where so you've got this here, and then you have the 35.8 identified separately. I would like to stress that I'm always trying to keep track of what's recurring versus what's one time, and that's sort of important just to as a way for getting a sense for, all right, we've got this one-time money, and then what can we expect going forward? I can pull up as the conversation goes on. I've done a 5-year 5-year outlook as well for capital. If I could, actually, I've got that somewhere, right here, and you can see that FY25 we've at about $81.1 million. Going forward, the normal is about 44 or so. Now, again, it depends on where you finish this year. Now, if we have a surplus this year, then you've got some half of that to be allocated here, but and the same thing on the needs here. So we've got a certain amount going forward, but certainly not, we haven't identified how we're going to use the 39 yet. So that's to be determined, but that just gives you a sense for what FY25 is, the benefit of having the half surplus this year, and going forward, the normal budget's around the low 40s.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions on that? Any so far? Okay. And then these other exhibits, these remain the same as before that were circulated earlier. So having laid all that out, I'd like to go to the list that we had oh, sure. Alderwoman Spencer. You got your hand raised?
I do. Sorry, Paul. I just wanted to ask a question on the roads, and I'm apologizing. I have a tremendous I'm not feeling well today.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
So, if you go back to the roads,
Sure.
can you describe the process? You know, one of the issues, obviously, we're having a lot of issues with road safety. Can you just briefly, just for the benefit of all of us, and maybe this is a question for Rich, just describe the process by which those were prioritized? Were we looking at crash data? Were we looking at other?
Yeah, Paul, I'll be glad to talk about that one.
And then is part of that, sorry, Rich, I'll just follow up and just say, is there any as a part of the improvements, are we talking about just paving, or are we also talking about increasing, you know, what all are we going to be doing on these projects?
Okay, you ready for me?
Yeah.
Okay, Cass Avenue improvements, I'll go right down the list and give you a highlight of each one. So the estimated project cost is, and it's Grand to Tucker, $24 million. Federal funding of 15.2 million. A raise grant has been applied for. There's a congressional earmark of $5 million secured. The local match share, as you see here, is $3.8 million. The project status, currently 30% design is completed. The raise grant was submitted in February on the 28th. The anticipated construction would be in 2027. And generally, the reason for this project is because of NGA and the corridor along with NGA. So 2 miles of roadway transformation, lane reduction, 1 lane in each direction with a median multi-use trail, raised intersections at stop control locations, ADA compliant corridor, new sidewalk and curb ramps, smart street lights, signal interconnect and upgraded traffic signals, traffic monitoring cameras, ADA improvements at all intersections, pilot electric vehicle charging stations, landscaping, new curbing, as well as transit upgrades. Okay. The next one is 4th and Washington Multimodal. Let me pull that one up here. Sorry. That is Shoto to Convention Plaza and 3rd to 14th Street. Estimated construction cost is 3.125 million. Federal funding, 2.5 million of a TAP grant, which we already have. Local match needed is 625,000, as you see here. The project status, 60% design is completed. Anticipated construction is 2026. 1.8 miles of bicycle, pedestrian, and traffic calming improvements such as bump outs and enhanced crosswalks, two-way protected cycle track and lane reduction on 4th Street, and raised intersection at Washington and 8th Street. The next is traffic management enhancements phase 6. I'll pull that one up. Excuse me. Okay. So traffic management enhancements phase 6. The project is from Hodiamont to Grand. The estimated project cost is 3.7 million. The federal funding is 2.9 million, and that is a CMAQ grant, which we have secured. The local match needed is 800,000, as you see here. Design start summer of 24, construction start of 2026. 3.8 miles of fiber optic signal interconnect, upgraded traffic signal controllers and equipment at 7 locations, traffic monitoring cameras, and ADA improvements at intersections. The next is ADA bus stop improvements. That is Grand Boulevard, Holly Hills to I-70, Cass Avenue, Dr. Martin Luther King, Kings Highway to Grand, Delmar, Hodiamont to Kings Highway. This is a partner project with Bi-State. The project cost is $3 million. Federal funding is $2.4 million of a TAP grant, which we have already secured. Bi-State provides 300,000 of the local match. The city provides the other 300,000. The design start is 2024 with an anticipated construction date of 2027. Improvements in accessibility at 92 bus stops, ridership demand analysis, and amenity upgrades, improvements such as shelters, benches, reconfigured loading areas, and other infrastructure. The next is Kings Highway improvements, Gravois to Nottingham. This is a locally funded project. The estimated construction cost is $2.0 million. The design and construction in conjunction with the ARPA funded Kings Highway corridor projects currently ready to go to construction. The design completion is summer of 2024. Anticipated construction is 2025. This is various traffic calming measures, lane reduction, concrete bump outs, concrete medians, delineators, striping, enhanced crosswalks, lane striping and bicycle markings, ADA compliant curb ramp at intersections, new traffic signal at Neosho and realignment of Christie and Neosho intersection, and buffered bike lanes. Finally, asphalt paving by the city street department with ARPA funding. And then last but not least is miscellaneous bridge repairs. And really the detail on that is we have 74 bridges within the city. and we have allocated substantial amounts of ARPA and capital funding to repair those. And we just rolled this out as a bridge repair item simply because it was the remaining funding in this item. And there is always something on one of our 74 bridges that needs repair. So we have a very robust program right now with 3 design consultants, 2 on-call contractors, and we believe our bridges are in the best shape they've been in the last 30 years. So I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you might have after that.
Thanks, Rich. I guess I was looking for like how we prioritize these projects. And if, like kind of looking at the next tranche or, even as we move through, looking at crash data and making sure that we're prioritizing those roads that are most dangerous. I mean, I think we've had 6 pedestrians killed since January 1 in the city of St. Louis. And so just thinking about how we can make our roads safer in a general sense. So the prioritization of those road projects in a general sense.
So they're prioritized by the fact that of all the things that you talk about, when we go out and we apply for grants with East West Gateway, all of those factors, crash data, traffic calming items, all these things on these grant projects are taken into account, as well as different criteria set by East West Gateway for TAP, CMAQ, and STPS type grants. But all of these projects touch pedestrian mobility, pedestrian safety, ADA type accessibility, traffic calming, and I say everything except the miscellaneous bridge repair item, which
Right.
obviously speaks for itself.
Yeah, I just want to be able to go back to our constituents and say, hey, we prioritized what we're investing in based on, these criteria and, so that we can start to make some headway on making our roads safer. I don't want to belabor that too much because I know you've kind of gone into it, but the last thing is on the 8A bus stops, I had asked in our previous meeting to have those itemized, and I wanted to make sure that the community, the CMT bus stop was included in that.
So there are 92 of them. I can certainly get you a list of them within those corridors. I don't have that with me today.
I see. Nancy, you raise your hand?
By accident. I apologize,
okay.
but I think just on the CMT, Rich, isn't that money being raised and from AARP and CMT together? I'm not sure they're needing funding from the city to complete that bus stop.
I can speak on that. They're raising money from ARP and CMT for the enhancements of the stop, but they've asked the city to make the ADA, to make the bus stop accessible, to address the ADA issues and the sidewalks, because that was not part of their project.
And can you tell me the exact location of that project?
Yeah, this is the first one that they've done in the that they're going to be doing in the city. It's at Gravois and Russell, more or less. I can get you the exact location, Rich, but yeah, so this is, I think, their 7th project in the region. This is the first one they've done in this, they're doing in the city. They did like a call for submissions, and this was the one that was selected.
So Gravois and Russell is not within this project limit. I will need to check with my planning staff, but I'm certain that we have made accommodations for that. If we have not, we will.
Okay, thanks, Rich. We have not at this point. So the question was raised to me, how we could fund it, so.
Hey, Rich, I like that little synopsis you did on those. Is that something that you could pull together and we just share as an exhibit, just the description? I know we have some of this briefly described in the inventory, but you went a little bit more detail on each of those street projects.
What I just had, Paul,
Yeah.
was information you sent out to the committee like this week. This was provided to the Citizen Advisory Committee on the briefing on streets in a PowerPoint. It's out there.
Oh, so that's still from the same PowerPoint then?
Yes,
It's not a Oh, it's separate. Okay. All right, great. All right, any other
I
questions?
have one last question on this crash sites. Aren't we using ARPA money for some of those sites, Rich?
Yes,
Okay,
10 top crash locations. That is
Okay.
correct. That's part of the corridor project.
Okay, great. All right, well, having done that, let's pull up the $36 million recommended list and we can discuss that. I don't know, Rich, if you wanted to just go through it and sort of say what you're recommending here and how we're looking at it and how we come about this, and we can talk about it.
Right, so, you know, everyone is accustomed to this list of red, yellow, green for $551 million of capital improvement needs. The red, which is the most critical, which is what we really target because it's the most critical, is $167+ million. And we have roughly $36 million here to work with. So when I looked down this list, I looked at each of the departments and the big items such as streets, parks, corrections, other municipal buildings, vehicles, as well as I compared what my thoughts were to the Citizen Advisory Committee recommendations. And what I would say is that there were only a couple items that the Citizen Advisory Committee recommended that I didn't have on my initial pass through. And so I made sure that I incorporated those. And those two items were Cass Avenue, which was on the roads and bridge funding we just talked about, and some renovations to the remaining restrooms at City Hall, and predominantly for the fact that to meet ADA accessibility. So if you look down the list, what you will notice is on many of these, what I have done is tried to spread the funding across multiple areas to try to get projects started. And in a lot of cases, not only get them started, some of these have already been started. And so we partially funded them before. So to continue what we're doing on those projects. So, I mean, I can walk through each of these and just talk about it. We've done that before. I'd be more than glad to try to answer any questions anybody has or entertain ideas of, you know, why you would do something differently, why I particularly put a certain amount with it. I'm more than glad to do that. But the general synopsis is to try to cover as many areas as possible with the very limited funding that we have.
Christina, I see your hand is raised.
Thanks so much. Definitely see the work that's went into this. One thing I wanted to ask about was the timing of the lights that I saw was missing. Let's see.
Which one, Christine?
There was,
The signal timing,
yeah,
the
signal
signal
timing.
timing project, is that what you're?
Yeah,
So that particular project is not something, and actually that particular project was replacing, let me look at it here real quick. That particular project was by street department, and it was signal timing and detection for $2 million. Most of that project is loop detectors in the pavement. But in the same token, you know, I hear you. It's a very important project. It's just a matter of where to make the cut at. So, you know, if everybody feels like that's something you would like to see on the list here, we certainly can entertain that. I have no objection to that. I just didn't know how to fit it in.
And that one was a $2 million item?
Yes, sir. so
And I,
just
although I
refresh-
assume it could also be, as we're doing these other things too, in terms of you have boiler replacement, pool renovations where the request might be 5 and you're allocating a portion. I assume that could also be for the signal timing, or was that just a total everything, or?
No, I think you can do that. So the signal timing was engineers optimizing and implementing new traffic signal timing on city arterials, install vehicle detection at critical intersections on city arterials, allow traffic signal to service upon demand. This is the goal to reduce unnecessary stops and delays 10 to 20%, promote a cost savings and fuel consumption of 25,000 per signal, lower vehicle emissions to the environment by 7,000 pounds per signal, and shorten wait time for pedestrians per signal cycle, estimated at $2 million. And so again, I believe you could take a portion of that and get that work started.
Okay. Let me see. I see a couple hands. I don't know who's first. Alderwoman Spencer, you had your hand raised?
You can let Alderwoman Schweitzer go first. I took the floor last time.
Okay. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Alderman Spencer. I do like the street timing lighting project a lot. I think it's really interesting. I believe you mentioned some portion of that happening as part of another project on the street money, but it was not. It was only for one small part and one street. So do we feel that the amount that was asked for in the capital or allocated, is that enough? Is that for everything you just laid out, or I'm just trying to get a sense of how much really that is that we'd be looking to put in here somewhere?
So yeah, you're correct that there is some on the CMAQ projects. That's predominantly what they do there. On the arterial projects, we are also doing internal signal timing. The traffic division is doing that. This, like I said, was predominantly for the detection timing, which is the loops that are actually in the pavement, and that also allows the signals to be retimed as well. So I just feel like you could do a part of that, or you could do all of it. It depends on what the appetite here is to do that.
And can you remind me how much that would be for all of it,
2 million.
for the whole city?
Well, it's for particular arterials that the street department had laid out, and it does not give me the details on how many.
Okay.
But my understanding was originally it was in downtown corridor arterial streets.
Downtown corridor.
Yes.
Yeah, that's my guess is it would be a lot bigger and a multi-year project to do the entire city.
Again, we could break it into some pieces and start to do the work and then, spread it out to where we want to go with it. But I'm sure it needs to be done. It's just a question of what is the appetite to do it.
And the argument for doing it is that the city becomes safer because we have a more managed system of signals going and moving at the same time. So people are more likely to follow the laws and the rules of the road and be put in safe situations. And it's just a more well-run city. Is there, I guess, to Alderman Spencer's point about spending money to reduce deaths on our streets, is that the argument made by streets for why we'd be doing that? I know that I've heard that from advocates in the space, but
I mean, the goals that they list are reduce unnecessary stops, promote cost savings and fuel consumption, lower vehicle emissions, and shorten wait time for pedestrians. So, I think anytime that you change the signals, you fix the signals, you get this anticipation of the signals work in conjunction with each other. And so it's not people sitting there and see a light 2 down turn green and more apt to run a light or things like that. Things work better in tandem. So it's probably a better controlled city. But, I can't say for every driver out there, but I'm sure if you're sitting at a light and 20 seconds goes by, you're there and you see the other lights beyond it turn green, the
Right.
inkling would be, I should go.
Yeah, we had a death in my ward in the last year or so, I think just within the last year, because of a signal that had been turned the wrong direction, and people ended up thinking they had a green when they didn't, and then somebody died. This wouldn't address that in terms of signals being turned or kind of moved. Obviously, this would just be the syncing of them.
Yeah, so this particular project would have nothing to do with that. That sounds, and if I'm not mistaken, I think you're referring to the signal that was at Bates and Morganford.
Yeah.
And I believe that that's more of a maintenance type item that's taken care of on a normal day.
Right.
You know, so this is just something to upgrade something that has gone bad.
Okay.
Or is going bad.
I'm just trying to get a sense for like what aspect of it we're paying for, whether it's like a signal itself, if it's like a sensor, if it's technology somewhere, if it's a control panel. I'm not super familiar with exactly what we'd be buying.
Right, so what you would be looking at here is basically the signal detection for the signals, and when they do the detection, so the detection of signals is done in two different ways. It's either done with a loop sensor in the pavement, or it's done with a camera mounted on top of the mast arm. So this particular project is talking about the detection, for the signals that, you know, you'll come up and you see there's cuts in the pavement. It's a magnetic item and it senses a vehicle sitting there, because some lights just are not programmed to change unless there's a vehicle waiting there. So that's what that is for, as opposed to just a normally timed signal that changes every, you know, 30, 35 seconds or whatever the timing on it is. This senses, tells the signal there is a car waiting, and so it goes through an expedited cycle.
Okay. And for what it's worth, I am very in favor of hearing all the different things that are proposed and more information about them all. But I know people have questions, so I appreciate everyone's time today.
Okay, Alderwoman Spencer?
Thank you, Paul. I have some questions about just in general, some, the, the PSAP that was in the critical needs list. I know, where is that being funded? Where is that project?
So we have, so right now it is in, design. The design is just about ready to wrap up. We currently have about $30 million put aside for it at the moment. It's a combination of, capital funding, EcoDevo funding, and, ARPA funding. And so, the idea is we would start building that in packages. Oh, and there's also, excuse me, there's also about $10 million in states, safety funding as well on that $30 million. So the idea is we would put out a package, over the summer to begin the foundation work for that building.
Okay.
Start there, and then there's conversations about, where the remaining funding for that would come from.
When you say 30, okay, so we have 30 million, we say set aside, what do you mean it's set aside? Is it in an account for that project? The capital needs list that we were looking through as a part of this, it identified 19 million, which is different than the original amount that I remember from, I don't know, 5 years ago, 35 million or something like that. So I'm just curious, and if we've got 30 million set aside, is the state giving us money that we can just put in a bank account? Are we earning interest on it? What do you,
Right. So
that's
it's
just such a critical need. I'm trying to understand where that is in the pipeline.
So it's a $49 million total project need. The reason that the capital needs list reflects 19 is because we have currently funded $30 million from multiple different sources. So
Okay.
on the table today is the remaining $19 million in needs for funding that. So I will ask Paul or Nancy if you either would like to make any commentary about where that other 19 million might come from.
Yeah, I can address part of it. We do have the public safety infrastructure piece of the economic development sales tax. If you recall, there was a portion allocated to public safety infrastructure. In the past year, we just allocated over $4 million for the sirens. That was a one-time, the emergency sirens, that was a one-time deal. I do expect there to be several $1 million allocated this coming year, and that was going to be allocated to PSAP as well. Now, that doesn't get you the 19, but that gives you a portion of that. And then the remaining, I don't believe it's been totally identified yet, but I do know that they're working again with the state to see what there's funds available, and we'll work from there. But in the meantime, I know Rich is going through the design process.
Okay. So we have,
So hold on, Alderman Spencer, I'll just answer that. The design was paid for through ARPA funds, which has allowed us to start on the project because those monies have to be used first. We have the monies that they've talked about already, and we are working with the state to identify additional money that could come back to us through different monies that they have in the state in different pockets.
okay,
We
so
try for some state ARPA infrastructure money, but they have been reluctant to give the city hardly any of that money so far.
thanks, Nancy. So what can you just tell us, what is the design, what was the design cost out of ARPA?
I think it's 3 million and change, Rich.
A little bit north of that. It's about it's almost 4.2. It's in that neighborhood.
Okay, thanks, Rich. What in the 30 million that we currently have set aside, where's that from? Was that from previous capital investments like we're doing here right now, or?
It's also from, we had a Go Bond money last year, and I think we took some money from the Go Bond, and the rest came from capital last year. The estimated cost for the PSAP is at least $45 million.
Okay.
We're trying to keep as close to that amount as possible.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful to understand where that's coming from. Looking at the projects here, the 2.7 million for the comptroller telecom system, can you walk me through that project? Is that just, what is that? That's a large amount of money for a telecom system replacement.
Judy, are you with us?
I am with you.
You want to describe that?
Sure, I will take that. Yes, that's for the upgrade of the telephone system, but that is also for 13 buildings. It's called the downtown campus. And the actual upgrade amount is about 5.3 million. We have 1.8 in ARPA funds. And then we've asked, our price went up because we didn't start last year as we had planned to. So some of the cost has now gone up. So even in addition to that 2.7, that's going to get us right at about 4.5, and we'll be about $800,000 short on that. But what I did do was ask to get a breakdown as to when funds were to be spent. And actually just got an email in on that I'm going to forward to Paul here now, that will show the breakdown as to when the funds will be needed.
Okay. Can you tell me what this project is? I understand it might be new phone systems. Is that what that is, Judy?
Well, yeah, it's new phones and all, but it's also wiring. All these buildings down here need to be rewired. It's covering 13 buildings, civil courts, Carnahan, City Hall, the morgue, forestry that's down on 13th Street, juvenile. Juvenile had several buildings over there that's included in that. I'm probably leaving out some of the buildings. Municipal Garage, Gateway Transportation Center, the building division that's on North Broadway. We have a few of those that's here in the 1520 building that was still on the old system, which won't require wiring here, but it will require some more work. Communications on Oakland and the Board of Elections.
Okay, but it is a phone system. Can we, can you tell me a little bit more? I mean, I know we need to update the phones. One of the things that I want to make sure we're doing when we're investing this kind of money, $5 million, is that we're doing it in the most, I would say, up-to-date way. Are we doing voice over IP investments? What sort of, if we're going to update the phones system, kind of throughout our campus, I just want to make sure that we're doing this in the most up-to-date
And
way.
we are, I don't know all the specifics, but it's all up to date. That's going to take us into the future. So I can't say that. It'll be everything that we need for moving forward. It just hasn't been done in so long. And yeah, we are doing all of the updates.
Is there a kind of some specs on that you could share, Judy? I'm just.
I can, but let me get all that from the telecom staff who's doing the upgrades, and then I could just send that out. I can send it to Paul and he could send it out.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that. I was looking for we went through this on an earlier version of the capital.
Yeah, we did.
And
Everything
where
that's
you
going
had
to be in
provided
there.
you had provided some information about where and the locations and all that. And I was looking for that just now, but I was going to pull it up, but I wasn't able to. But yeah, if you could get the most recent updated information, we'll get it out to the committee. That'd be helpful.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'll do that.
I think out of that last discussion, it's been some years, but one of the concerns was that it was maybe that we were not using a system that would tie the wireless into the phone lines and be maybe up to date in that way, and tie into kind of the way that the police department and some of the more modern departments within city government are handling those communication systems. It's my understanding that those maybe ways of sort of wiring are not only more up to date, but they're less expensive. So I just want to make sure that with this type of investment, especially if we're falling short of the full needed amount, that we're following best practices and that we're not going to be behind the ball on these types of investments. Can we talk about the circuit attorney's office? I know I've been hearing from some of our new prosecutors in this office, and just from some folks and people in general, that we really need to update their technology. Is this enough? I just want to make sure we consulted with those staff members over there. I know they're probably extremely busy right now, just getting kind of revamping that whole office, but I just want to make sure that we're getting the circuit attorney everything they need to be a more modern functioning office. Maybe Nancy could, I don't know if anybody has spoken to.
Paul, do you want me to answer?
Yeah, go
that?
ahead, Nancy. You can do that.
So I've had numerous conversations with the circuit attorney's office, with the chief of staff, as well as with the circuit attorney himself. This amount that they've asked for here, I think gets them where they're going. There's a bigger ask, which is more problematic financially at this moment, which is to update the courts, which I think is, Paul, one or the other. I can't see the complete screen
Yeah, we
right
do.
now.
Yeah. Let's see.
There you go. That is a bigger issue long-term, because the courts are not modernized in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And the overall project for the courts would be closer to $8 million to upgrade the between 25 and 28 courtrooms that they have. So with every so many million, we can do 3 or 4 courtrooms at a time. So we're hoping that this amount of money might allow us to begin the project. And Rich has done more of the configurations on this to start moving forward. But the circuit attorney's money was what they had said that they needed at this time.
Okay.
They
but thank you-
don't have, I'm going to say something Paul doesn't like, but they don't have money in their budget that hasn't been spent that could be used for the 420,000 that they have listed of needs. Because ideally, if they had money in some of their departments, in some of their line items that they hadn't used yet, I was trying to move them to use that and then take the other bit of money and put it more towards the courts. But neither the courts nor the circuit attorney have as much unfunded money as sometimes some of the departments have had. A couple of years ago or so, the circuit attorney's office had more vacancies. There was salary savings that could be used. That's not the case at this point.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Thanks,
It is a
Nancy.
good thing, but unfortunately, it doesn't help me take and move money around right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. I have 2 more smaller questions, and then I'll pass the mic. On the Soulard Market, I know that was identified as a top need from the public engagement, and I certainly agree with that. We've got 1.6 million listed here, but in the critical needs document that we looked at earlier this week, it was significantly higher. Do we know what we would get for this $1.6 million for Soulard Market renovations?
So typically, when I do something like this, remember we had about 1.5 million previously from a
Mhm.
capital, Board Bill 168, which we started work on the boiler replacement and all the distribution system for the boiler, as well as all the electrical and other things there. So we don't know where that 1.5 is exactly gonna take us originally. So what we would continue to do is to work with Greg, Kim, and the market master, as well as the vendors there, and we would be prioritizing. Now, we did have an exhibit on Soulard Market. There it is right there. Thanks, Paul. So what you have is, we start from the top down and look at things like electrical. We look at, security lighting, plumbing, those type of things that are critical.
Mhm.
And so really what happens is they're pretty dynamic because these things fail a
Mhm.
lot and they fail regularly. And so we would allocate this money and we would work with Kim and Greg and the market master to say, okay, the money's in place now. What is the next thing that is the most critical on the list? And it could be just about anything that's on the list here, but my thought would be plumbing, electrical, mechanical, things to keep water out of the building, anything along those lines there that, for the operation, bathrooms, ADA type upgrades, things along those lines. But to tell you exactly what we would get, I don't know, but it would be picked off of this list.
Hopefully
Okay.
we can get to some visual improvements at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the bathrooms are in such bad shape. I know we're constantly having issues over there. The last is a similar one in the park side, the pool renovations. I have the honor of representing a pool anymore, but certainly Marquette is still near and dear to my heart. And I know, Nancy, you and I've talked about the fencing over there for some time, and just curious if we're going to be able to deliver that for the neighborhood.
So what I would tell you is there are 7 pools, 3 outdoor, 4 indoor, without going through the locations of them. Previously, underneath the Board Bill 184, we allocated $1 million under the general obligation bond 2023 we allocated $1 million. And when we started work on, Candy, 12th and Park Rec Center and Cherokee on the pools, there was also some other work that happened, at Fairgrounds Park and Chambers Park due to some very, unfortunate vandalism that happened over the last couple years, which I would really prefer not to talk about. But the answer there would be is, this money is allocated. They're continuing to do stuff like, pumping systems, concrete, the fencing. So that particular comment about the fencing, Alderwoman, I would say, that decision would be something that we would talk with, obviously, Greg Hayes and his staff about, as well as the alder, and, see what could be done there that would hopefully, please everyone.
Okay, thanks, Rich. I'll pass the mic.
Okay, I see a few hands raised. I'll do Christina and then Noel. Okay, go ahead, Christina.
Okay, I'll be short. I think it sounds like we could do some money towards signal timing. The 2 million is kind of like the top. I think besides the telecom system replacement, that seems to be not fully funded and flexible. That might be where some of the funds can come from. And I agree with the approach to fund, it's like about 25% of the pool renovation, Seward Market, the HVAC upgrades for the rec centers that were on the list. The only other one that I didn't understand was the security cameras, 1415 North 13th Street.
Going back to the general list.
And the last comment I have is just, Nancy, you talked about some departments being able to move funds around from their existing budget. And I was wondering how much of the police department capital needs could be covered in that way, such as the academy replacing the HVAC unit.
Actually,
Thanks.
Christina, I'm glad you asked that, because they had the request on the sedans on here as a critical need. And I had suggested to the police department that they do just that, where they transfer monies within some funds this year, so we don't have to scrape that out of the capital budget. So that's why that's not on this list in particular.
Right, and as far as their other stuff, I didn't see as much of their budget being able to be moved around that way, especially once Paul moved the sedans over to them. So, but we still have a couple days to go through people's budgets again and see where else you have it moved. So
that particular item at the academy, the HVAC, just if I may touch base on that for just a second, the $100,000, that unit is over 50 years old. It is actually rotted out, and we have manufactured parts in-house for it because you cannot even come close to buying parts for that anymore. And so that's where all the trainees go. In the summertime, we fight to keep that unit operational. When it has failed, we have figured out ways to bring in temporary HVAC to keep that area somewhat cool. So that one, in my mind, is something that we just absolutely cannot maintain anymore. And that area is used by the academy every day. So I would really ask for your consideration on that item.
Okay, Noel, you had your hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Just had a quick follow-up question about the Soulard Market building and whether that $6.5 million in total capital needs, whether that is what's needed to bring the entire building, including that second floor space, or just have that, or just what's needed to kind of stabilize the first floor and what's currently in use.
Those are absolutely critical needs. When we looked at this before, you know, my guess is you could probably spend another $8 to $10 million over there doing other items. But this is actually critical needs for the operation of the building in the way that it is used today. So no, it does not address all those other items.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. And then second question is about Cass Avenue. If Rich, you could just talk about the total project cost and capital stack for that project.
Yeah, let me pull that back up again real quick here. So the total project, so Cass Avenue is a total project cost of $24 million. It is from Grand to Tucker. It is federal funding. We applied for a raise grant. We don't have it just yet, but we turned a raise grant in for it for 15.2 million. And we also have a $5 million congressional earmark secured. So we get the raise grant, we will need a local match share of about $3.8 million to do that project.
Aren't there also, thank you, aren't there also bond funds that were approved in Board Bill 36 previous session? And what is the anticipated use for that $20 million in bond funds?
So I would tell you that's a Rob Orr question that is not included in this funding that I have in front of me. So I've heard that conversation before, but it is not part of our funding to do Cass Avenue.
Got it. I can follow up with Rob Orr on that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think Nancy, did you have?
Yeah, just two things. One is Rich, I don't think, and I'm gonna speak for Christina and you can correct me. I don't think Christina was trying to not do the academy. She was trying to, I think she looked at it and said, there's 100,000. Can you find that out of the general funds they have and move that more than based on my previous statement? And we're still looking. The second thing is a question for Judy, because we'd had some conversations before. I thought this 2.7 was the end of the money needed in order to complete the 13 buildings. That this is the last amount that we needed. We had funded this before and that this was the last amount of money that was needed for this project.
No, we had the other updates that was part of that has been done, and that was the sections that needed the 5.9 that have the call centers. So remember, we had to do new call centers for all of that, for CSB, for the city courts, the building division, and somebody else I'm leaving out. I'm sorry, I forgot who the
That's
other
okay.
one. But anyway, for those call centers, that's done, that's completed. So that took part of the money. And then what's left in ARPA now is the 1.8.
Right, but after the 1.8 and this 2.7, am I correct in assuming that there is no more money needed for the telecom system replacement?
No, the total cost is the 5.3. And that's going to give us 4.5. So we're about 800,000 short.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I do have a breakdown in terms of spent over what fiscal year we needed. So that's what I'm doing now with AT&T. And then I have that and I'll send it, but I'm going to send it to Paul when I get the breakdown also of everything that's included in this upgrade, so it can go out to the committee.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alderwoman Schweitzer?
Thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and a lot of people have asked questions I've had, and I appreciate everyone else asking those questions. I had some questions. I'm hoping to go through the vehicle replacement list, and also I just have a lot of concerns about how many pavers we have and how many we might need to do a lot of these paving and arterial projects, and I would love to hear about our shape on that.
Well, we've got the man for that. I believe that would be Chris. I don't know, Rich, did you do it?
Yep, I'm
Yep.
here. I'd be happy
Let
to.
me pull up. I think I've got,
The street department has two pavers that are operational. One of them is fairly new, 2 years old. One of them is 7 years old. And so a paver is a critical piece. Basically, you have a milling machine that takes the stuff off, and then you have the paver that puts the overlay back on. And then there's lots of other things like rollers and things that take care of sewer lids and all those other kind of pieces. But the paver is one of the big ones. So with two pavers, you really can only count on doing one major project at a time, because it will fail and it will be down for multiple days during it. And so to try to have one spare, like the old one's good enough to be a spare, but if Streets tries to run two crews the way they used to, and without a third paver and without a third miller, then the end result will be they'll be in the middle of the job and maybe down for a week or two while the equipment gets fixed. So we put people on call. They usually do overnight paving on busy areas like downtown. And we'll put people on night shift to take care of the immediate problems. But when they have a major problem, that particularly if it's parts that are not in country and have to come from Germany, it can be down for a week or two between. So it's been over a decade since the street department has had this big of a paving project coming up. With everything we got in ARPA and the money that's allocated here, they definitely could be running 3 or 4 at a time if they had the people to do that, which I don't think they have that many people either. But really, you can only count on having 1, maybe 2 at a time paving projects because of the equipment at this point. And basically,
Chris?
it would take. Yes, sir.
Chris, when you mentioned pavers and all, I'm looking at the inventory. I was looking for that. Are they called something, a particular model, or are they called something else?
Actually, they're not on this list. And the reason they're not on this list is because they are bought with St. Louis Works money out of the street department's budget.
Okay, but I'm talking about the total inventory, not the.
No, I understand.
Okay.
The only thing listed here is stuff that's coming in and stuff that's critical to be replaced with capital. And so we don't replace them with capital because they're replaced with St. Louis Works money. So that's why they're not listed.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to go over that because I thought that was the total inventory, but okay.
So we're waiting to see whether that would be in a St. Louis Works bill.
What I've pulled up on screen is what, and Chris, I've pulled up on screen is what you have identified priority replacement on vehicles, which then you can identify, depending on how much funds you have, where the cutoff would be. That's typically where how that would work. So,
that full report's 32 pages long.
yeah.
And it's not recognized by replacement, but it is the street departments and the 514s.
Right.
So yeah, pavers should be listed on the vehicle by vehicle one.
That's what I was looking for. I didn't know what it was called, but right now I'm pulled up on the inventory. Which we included, but obviously didn't include the full list. But we included the first 100 or so items, which add up to 11 million or so. And what's on our what have we got? We've got 5.9. So if you go to our inventory, wait a minute, wrong one. 5.9 would get us down to what, item 16 or so on your list. So it would be all these things above it. Is that, am I presenting that correctly, Chris?
That would be how it would be after we prioritize. This is not prioritized. This is just
Oh, I thought that was the priority.
No, this is the format for a prioritized list, but this isn't priority. This is the entire 35 million worth. That's
So
why
it'd be
it
good to
was so
get that
long.
prioritized list.
Yeah, we're gonna need that.
Well, I'll do the prioritized list when you tell me how much money we have.
No,
There's no point prioritizing $35 million worth and spend $5.
well,
Because I have to go to the department.
typically when we have these discussions on rolling stock, you give us the priority, and then whatever amount that we have, that's where we cut it off.
And that is, well, that's what I'll do.
Yeah,
Now that
that's gonna, I think that would help, Alderwoman Schweitzer know exactly what those vehicles are there on this list and what's not on that list. So that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, what I need to do is take a target number that's not 35 million and go back to the departments and say, what's the most critical you have? And then I can make the new sort list where you draw the line on it. So now that I know the straw man has a little less than 6 million in it, plus 2.4 million in it for the fire department, then I can do that. But it's still a question of policy-wise whether or not you want to spend citywide capital on St. Louis Works equipment.
Well, that's a different conversation. What I would ask you to do for the committee is do what you normally do when you provide us with a priority list, and just give us the priority list, and then when we arrive at that final number of recommendations, and you're able, and that's where the cutoff will be.
Yep, I'll do that next week. I don't expect everybody to remember this, but when we did the ARPA discussion for 2 years ago, we had the decided to put the north-south roads, $14.5 million worth for overlays of all the north-south arterial roads. At the bottom of that list, I put $2.5 million for equipment, which was for the street department to replace their St. Louis Works equipment. The reason I did that is because at the time we were not getting St. Louis Works money allocated. And so Kent Flake, the streets commissioner, said that they didn't have the money to do that. They bought one paver when they needed to buy 2 pavers and a miller. And so that's the difference between what the expectations are for the amount of paving to do and the amount of equipment that they have available.
I would just be very hesitant to leave this committee meeting or without having, and Chris, do you mind muting when you're not talking? Otherwise there's a bunch of background noise.
Yeah, and Chris, can you repeat what you just said about the pavers? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
Yeah, let me just finish my, I just want to make sure that at the end of this committee meeting, before, St. Louis Works discussions coming up too, that we are sure that the city of St. Louis, equipment-wise, can finish every single paving project that's part of our ARPA funds that we've spent by the time they would be due. That's the reason I'm asking this question. So I want to kind of approach it with that thought, as opposed to where normally we spend money from.
Well, if all the ARPA money for the original 14 million for the north-south streets has to be done by 26, it would be difficult for the street department to get that done with the current equipment they have. Because they're only going to be able to guarantee do one at a time, and they will be able to do one small one and one major one at a time. So to do a north-south road like that, at least the way when they used to do it 10 years ago, it would take them the better part of a month to get one road done. So if you look at it that way, then you're looking at 10 months worth of paving and a few months you can't do during the winter. And so if you're only doing one at a time, plus the work that's on here with the gas tax money, then it's unlikely that they can run that many. Now, when Rich and I discussed this back when we did the ARPA's part of it, it wasn't known for sure whether or not the street department was going to do it or it was going to be contracted out. But then the discussion since then has been that contracting out the overlay work was much more expensive than having the street department do it. So the question becomes, you know, if you want to have the street department do it, they have to have the crews and they have to have the equipment. And I know exactly what they have, and I know exactly what it is that Flake says they need for it. And the answer to your question is they don't have the equipment they need to do all that in that period of time currently. And there isn't enough money in the St. Louis Works budget that will come in during that time, because the next St. Louis Works budget that comes in, if we order equipment with that, it won't be here until 26. Because it takes from the time it gets appropriated and we bid it and then it gets delivered, it's usually 8 to 12 months in that time period. So it's, and St. Louis Works is not in sync with the rest of the budget. So I'm not exactly sure when it's going to come out this time. But that's something the street department works on with the board of aldermen. And I'm just an ancillary user of that to keep their equipment running. So I'm sorry if I didn't meet the expectations of the committee for the complete prioritized list. I'll be happy to do it. It's not.
I think it's imperative that we have these discussions now before it's too late.
Yeah,
On what the streets department needs to do the millions and millions and millions of dollar work we're depending on. So I appreciate the honesty there, Chris. Thank you. And Kara wanted you to, Alderman Spencer wanted you to repeat what you were talking about purchasing papers, but maybe you did answer that question, but I'm fine to pass it over to her for that question now. If that's all
If
right.
you could just repeat that whole process, and I just want to stand up and reiterate what Alderwoman Schweitzer is saying, just getting this ARPA paving done is so critically important. So that process you were talking about 2 years ago, Chris, could you just repeat?
Yes. The ARPA funds, the first year of the ARPA funds has all the north-south overlays in it. It was $14.5 million, I think, was the final number on that. When the discussion of the capital committee had happened for that, I went to Kent Flake, who's the street commissioner, and said, okay, so how many crews are you going to have to run? How much equipment do you have? At that point, we only had one miller that was working and 2 pavers. They were both old. So I put $2.5 million at the bottom of that list of the roads for streets in the exhibit, but it did not get approved as part of the ARPA plan by the time it all came out. So we didn't have any money for equipment. So the only equipment money we had was what was in St. Louis Works. And then St. Louis Works, the next year, you may remember that it was delayed completely because the aldermanic committee didn't release the funds. So we went 2 years without having any St. Louis Works funds. When we got those at the end of last summer, they ordered a new roller out of that. And then the year before that, the street department transferred money around within their budget to get a new paver. So now we have one old paver and one relatively new paver. We have a medium-aged milling machine that takes the stuff off, the grinding, and we have an old one. And then we have the rollers and the sweepers and the small equipment that's necessary. There's like 25 pieces of equipment involved in an overlay. That stuff is not in too bad a shape because they use it for other things as well. just little patches and things. And so they have been able to keep that up out of their regular operating budget. So the real problem is we've got plenty of money in the ARPA budget from 2 years ago to do the north-south overlays, but not enough equipment to execute it, and not enough money coming in through St. Louis Works in time in order to order it and have it ready to go. Street Department said they're planning on starting paving at the end of March and early April, so they're only a week or two away. The last piece of equipment is out at Roland Machinery right now, having the winter make ready. Everything else has already been through the system. So it's we'd have to have enough money if you want to do 2 at a time to get all that done, guaranteed every dollar spent by the 26th. They'd have to be able to run 2 crews all the time, which means at least one more miller at $320,000 and at least one more paver at about $140,000, $150,000. And that would be the minimum amount of equipment you'd have to run 2 crews. But you'll have to talk to Kent Flake or his director about whether or not he has the staff to run 2 simultaneous crews for overlays. There's one thing whether or not you have enough materials to do it, which is what the capital money is used for, is the materials involved, and enough equipment, but you also have to have staff to do it. And I'm not the expert on that. Kent is the expert.
If I can jump in and make a couple of comments about that. So yes, there is a concern about the pavers. My approach to this would be simple, and that is if the pavers break down and we can't repair them, what we need to do is we need to have an agreement out there where we could rent the equipment to utilize it. The other thing, the final approach would be, is that we would contract the work out. Now, contracting the work out would cost more than streets doing it, but that is how we will get through it.
And I will just add on that the director of Streets Department is Bethany Williams, and we have had some conversations about this. And while I love to hear Chris talk about what we need in equipment, Chris is not necessarily up to date on how we're trying to approach all the work. The goal is to use and spend all the ARPA money within the next year and a half at the latest, or have it contracted to be able done before the end of 2026 and cover these projects. There are additional people that are being hired and asked to hire. If we don't have the equipment, we will follow what Rich has said. And if that doesn't work, our intention is to contract out. But to the best of my knowledge, the Commissioner of ESD has not been in conversations with the Streets Department director or the director of operations as to how we are operationally going to do all the work that we need to do. So while it's good that he's provided us with information, all the STL Works money that we finally appropriated from the Board of Aldermen last year has not been spent yet. And I've just let Alderman Schweitzer know there's another bill for $5.2 million coming this year that will be in the next Board of Aldermen session, which I think begins sometime in April. So
I think what Ms. Ramos was saying was that we wouldn't be able, if we had any paver needs to purchase in the St. Louis Works, they wouldn't be here in time. But I think to your point about, the plan for this, I know a plan has to be submitted to the federal government to say how we're spending ARPA funds and making sure that they're all expended and all of that. I think I'm interested in the sort of, if not plan A with Streets Department doing this work, knowing now kind of, I think that we're all acknowledging that we don't have what we need for just the Streets Department to do the work, and it will be either renting pavers or contracting. How that changes the financial landscape of what we've allocated for through American Rescue Plan Act, how much more money that would look like. I think those are kinds of questions that I want plans for, especially as we move towards a very real deadline to spend all of the money.
we will have some questions with the director of streets But I want to remind people that that's an operational discussion and we will be willing to keep you updated. But how those things get done is how it gets done within the operations. And we have had some initial conversations as to what that would look like. But in the meantime, we have to look like we've been filling potholes right away now because the weather has been warmer. Some things depend on the weather and how things will go. But we will update the board on that, but we have to be allowed to do our operational work to get the things done. And there are people involved in this process that have been in conversations about what needs to be done and how it needs to be done on a regular basis. And that is a little bit separate from this capital discussion, because the capital discussion is about what monies do we need and what can we do moving forward. So I feel like that's a question that discussion should be outside of the capital meeting, because that's an operational issue, not how we're spending money.
Yeah, I mean, as a
I would
relationship-
like to just make sure that whatever list we get reflects from the rolling stock reflects the priority of what we want to replace, and taking everything into account. This is our priority list, and so that we've got so much money available for purchase of rolling stock, we know what that is going to buy. That's my bottom line on terms of a capital standpoint. That's what we need to figure out on the rolling stock. Let me see. Noel, is that a new hand?
Nope, forgot to take it down.
Okay. Alderwoman Spencer, were you also had a hand raised?
Thanks, Paul. I just wanted to ask, in addition to this paving work, if we are coordinating with the utilities to ensure that if we actually get this paving done, they don't come in the next year and just tear all this up. And here we are left with square one.
Yeah.
I was going to jump in to interject. That's always the question, because we got that same question of Citizens Advisory Committee and all that type of stuff. So go ahead, Nancy.
We have a meeting scheduled with every utility that does work in St. Louis City to discuss how this is going to look. They're to bring their 5-year plans with them of where they intend to do work. We now have a plan as to what work we're going to do. A couple of the utilities are already trying and have had meetings with Director Williams from the Streets Department about when do we think we're going to do certain roads, so that they can do any work that they have to do there before we do the final paving. So we're going to have the first conversation with them to go over plans to see how we can coordinate, and then have some discussion about if things are off of the plan, how that would be handled afterwards. There's been some understandings, apparently handshake agreements as to what should or shouldn't be done when things are paved. And so we're looking to have more clarity and a better system on this. And Director Williams is not on this committee, but has expressed that she's trying to look at things from an asset perspective, where you would look at what we have and move forward and work with people on how to make this a more viable system so that this doesn't happen as much. There'll always be occasional problems. Unfortunately, MSD and the water department, we can do schedules with them, but if leaks or something comes, the road is going to be ripped up for an emergency situation. But the goal long-term is to have everybody in the room. And so far, I think there are 25 people attending this meeting to talk about where their work is and how this will go, and how we might actually be able to have some kind of software that everything is in a system so that people can look at who's doing what where and try to coordinate better. But it's the first time they've all been in the room at the same time. So we'll see how that goes.
Thanks, Nancy. If we could share that with the public, I think it'd be very helpful.
I would like us to be able to do some work. And before we run to the public and say, this is what we're doing, I'd like to be able to work with the group on what we're going to do. And when we have some solutions, put those solutions out to people, rather than saying we had this meeting, but we're not telling people what happened like, we don't have any outcome from the meeting. So I'd like to have some meetings where we have some outcomes that we can tell the public. And when we get to that point, we'll be happy to share that information with them.
Yeah, no, I agree, but sharing with the public. So, I mean, I think, being blindsided by, what the utilities are doing is extremely problematic. So sharing that would be very helpful.
All right. Any more hands? No. Okay. Any other questions on the proposed list here? Obviously, we have some homework to do on this. No? Okay. Alderwoman Spencer.
I just have one additional question, Paul.
Sure.
I really appreciate you saying this, and I'm sorry that I haven't gone through it all in detail. If I have additional questions, if the committee has additional questions before, I'm hoping we can kind of circulate those via email if they come through as we kind of let this settle.
Sure. You said if you have some in the future, you mean after the meeting?
In the next couple of days. I mean, I've looked through this. I really appreciate
Sure.
you sending it with a more than a full day's time, and that was really appreciated. But I just am being honest and saying
Yep.
that I haven't been able to fully vet it, even despite
Sure.
that generous time.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. So if you have some questions, you can send them in. Obviously, our next meeting is on the 2nd, so hopefully that'll give you everyone time to digest things and figure that out. We do have, so it seems like, and let me summarize some items that we talked about. Seems like some sentiment that we want to figure out how to get some signal timing into the list somehow. That seems to be one of the ideas. Also, we definitely need that priority list on the rolling stock, because if we, with that amount that we're going to advise that we have available here, what particular in the priority from a priority standpoint, what would that buy us in terms of rolling stock, and whether or not would need to include paving equipment or not. I can't say that. I'll let Chris identify the priorities, and then we can put it out there and say this is what we want to, and we can discuss it and just determine what exactly we need. Let me see. Were there any other outstanding issues on other items that we wanted to talk about?
I'd be interested in seeing the telecom plan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Very good. Thank you, Christine. I wrote that one down. I had it right in front of me. Yeah, the telecom detail, Judy, once you provide that, I'll get that out to everyone on the committee, so you have that.
Thanks. The telecom plan, and as well the ADA bus stops. And
the list of ADA bus stops, right?
And Rich mentioned that if we hadn't figured out how to do the Gravois CMT, the plan to get that one addressed. Thanks, Paul.
Okay. Alderwoman Schweitzer, you had your hand?
I had asked for, excuse me, the kind of plans of getting all of the ARPA funds spent in what equipment's needed and how that's all going to work, and just making sure that we're not missing a capital opportunity if we need to put more of the money or more of the to getting this ARPA work done. Obviously, there's some money already in this for finishing some of the American Rescue Plan Act corridors, like the Kings Highway traffic calming and some other pieces as well. So I just want to make sure that we can get those projects done. That's my #1 priority. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping that any priorities identified on the rolling stock list will take any of that into account. But that's.
Thank you.
Sure.
I would just caution when we get that list, when the board passed the bill the last time on what equipment we should buy, it ended up that the equipment cost more than was outlined, and so we had to change things around. So if there's some decision to do that, I think we have to be general enough so that we're able to get what we need to get and spend the money if that's the decision made. So I'll try not to say that the next time we meet, but we do need to be cautious on that because we jammed ourselves by having exact names of things to be bought instead of letting that be done by the department. It's the EDS department I'm talking about at that.
To that point, is there a reason that the fire department quints are explicitly detailed out and not in the rolling stock list?
The reason for that is because we just break them out. Those are big ticket, big dollar items. Public safety, we've always done a little bit separately than the regular rolling stock because those are called the emergency fleet and oil. And so we want to be very transparent. But I would say that what Nancy just said, I would echo that when we get down to the final list, assuming everyone is happy with this, to keep this somewhat general gives us an opportunity to, if a vehicle overruns by $10,000, we can move it from one to the other without being hand-tied.
Makes sense.
Okay, well, it sounds like we have some follow-up to do. As I mentioned, our next meeting is on the 2nd, which we hope to come to some recommendations out of that from that meeting. But in the meantime, we'll get the material and the backup that we need circulated around committee on those projects that we talked about. And if you have any other questions on that you need some more detail on, please let me know, and I'll try to track that down for you so we can get that all done, so we can have something to vote out on the next meeting. And does that sound like a plan? Good. All right. Well, thank you all for your time today, and we'll be seeing you definitely next week. And have a good weekend.
Thank you all.
You too.
Have a good weekend.